Hi, friends! Feels weird saying hi, friends, so excitedly. But Merry Christmas, everyone. A bit of a downer to the end of Christmas if you're a 49ers fan. Unfortunately, for 49er fans, the 49ers just got humiliated. I feel like that's the only way to kind of address that type of loss. For a little while, it felt like it was competitive. There was a second there where Brock Purdy had thrown three interceptions and the defense had only allowed 8 points off of them, and you kind of thought, okay, maybe they'll turn this around. My immediate takeaway is just that the offense never ever settled in. Brock Purdy looked extremely rattled all game. I felt like Kyle Shanahan's game plan was a little bit off, and he definitely was not the best coach on the field. Brock Purdy was definitely not the MVP that he has been in previous games. It was just pretty much a bit of a disappointment, in my opinion. Coming into this game, I didn't expect a blowout win on either side, but if I did, I feel like we've just been accustomed to seeing the 49ers blowout teams, so you would have assumed it would have been them. I think that it's safe to say that the AFC is just a much better conference than the NFC right now. I will say, for positivity, watching all the other games this weekend, I still think the 49ers are the best team in the NFC. But yeah, this doesn't give me any hope for the Super Bowl or if they're even going to get to a Super Bowl. Just watching how I think the two most important people on the 49ers played, which would be Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy. Chris McCaffrey played great, but what was your immediate takeaways? Also, really quick, I just want to say, anyone in the chat, I know that the press conferences are going on right now. So if we get any updates to Trent Williams, Brock Purdy, I know towards the end of the game was cleared, but it did look like he hit his head. Jalen Moore was taken out. So just if there's any major injury updates, put it in the comments and I'll make sure to read it. But yeah, Rohan, what was your takeaway? How's your Christmas football night been? Not Christmas, but how was the game for you? What were your immediate
Yeah, this
takeaways?
one obviously is not a great win or not a great game for the 49ers. I mean, you talk about this game, you can break it down in two different ways. You can point to offense, defense, you can point to the turnovers, you can point to first half, second half. I don't think the 49ers really win in any aspect if you look at it. San Francisco struggled really to start the game. I mean, they operated in a different pretense, more of a pass first philosophy overall, and it seemed like both teams kind of looked to do that. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens also passed a good amount in that first half. And I didn't hate the philosophy. I thought Christian McCaffrey, I mean, obviously, if you have him, you probably prefer to run the ball more. But when you look at the way the 49ers didn't have offensive success, the first pick, that's on Brock Purdy. Threw the ball a little late on the crosser to Debo Samuel. Makes sense. It was his third read, but that's a ball he probably wants back and a ball that cost the 49ers at least 3 points in the red zone where you usually get seven. 49ers came into this game 10 for 10 in their last 10 opportunities in the red zone, 13 for their last 14. They went up against the number one red zone team, and the defense prevailed for Baltimore. Really, when you look at the red zone numbers, the 49ers weren't great. And one of them was just outside the red zone, their first field goal. It was at the 25-yard line, but still, Baltimore was able to shut down San Francisco whenever they got really close until the game got out of hand. And so the way that I look at it, that first pick, that's on Purdy. The second pick, bad luck. I don't know if you can attribute it to more the way that Baltimore ran that one. I mean, you obviously have the cornerback crashing in. He obviously gets a deflection, and you needed Marlon Humphrey to have a cornerback blitz on the blind side in order for that play to work, and that's exactly what happened. And he was doing that on a completely different pretense. It's just he was in the right place at the right time. The third interception, a ball, I think that was 50-50. I mean, that's a ball. It's on third down. I don't think you should throw that crossbody with Brock as if you're Brock Purdy, but another ball that's kind of
Do you
just tipped
remember
up in
him?
the air.
Do you remember
Huh?
him a couple games? Do you remember him a couple games ago going to the press conference and promising to never throw that ball again?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you and I had a post game, or not a post game, but a show, and I was like, he's gonna throw that again because he thinks he can
yeah.
make them. And
And he
he got
did, and it ended up being a
that
pick.
time it worked out for him, but yeah, this time it did not. at all.
Yeah, that's the danger throwing crossbody with the arm strength that Brock has. It's a little dangerous of a pass, and I don't know if he thought there was a penalty flag on that one. I don't know if he thought it was a free play, and he's kind of just giving a 50-50 ball to Kittle. Not a great pass there. And that one ended up being the third pick. The fourth one was just ugly. It's just out in front. But that one was in the second half. Overall, this game, San Francisco offensively could never get a rhythm. Tried to throw the ball, and then, in the second half when it's too late, really still couldn't get a rhythm until Sam Darnold kind of came in at the very end. And then defensively, first half, I thought they played pretty darn well. I mean, there were a couple of mishaps, the 31-yard run for Lamar Jackson among them. There were a couple of mishaps, but ultimately, you forced 3 field goals in the red zone. That's pretty tough to do. And they ended up, they turned the ball over 3 times. Defense had poor field position, and it was like you mentioned post or prior to the show, they only got 8 points out of those 3 possessions. It was 16-12 coming into the half, and the 49ers had the ball to start the second half. And then the collapse continued. Ugly one here. Like you pointed out, it's a humiliating defeat, but one I think the Niners can kind of flush away and move forward. I don't disagree. I think they're still the best team in the NFC. And I mean, if you look at it, a couple of teams in the NFC right now are really struggling. Not really struggling, but not doing as dominant as you'd want them to be. Philly just, they were in a one possession game with New York just earlier today. New
Yeah,
York has
that was
not been that good
crazy. It
overall.
looked like they were about to lose
Exactly.
to the Giants.
And Dallas, I mean, they lost a minute. They lost to Miami, just lost to Buffalo. They've also been struggling. So the NFC right now looking kind of weak overall, but a lot of questions coming out of this one.
I completely agree. So I wanted to ask you, when you looked at this loss, did you think that it was all on Purdy, or do you think that it was? Did you have see problems with Kyle Shanahan's game plan? Later on in the game, there was a lot of missed tackle issues. I saw you tweeting about that. Kyle Posey has been consistently keeping a tally. I think it was against it was the last game that they've had like 17, 15, and 12 missed tackles. And I didn't see him write down the stat for this one, but I know in the latter half there was a lot of them. Now I do really want to say, because I even tweeted about this, I think that people I do not like my dad and I were kind of arguing about this during the game. He was saying, what is this defense doing? And I kind of was like, I don't think we should bring up the defense that much when we're talking about this loss, because I think they held the Ravens to a really low score considering that the 49ers threw 5 interceptions. Like that could have been so many more points. And it really only got out of hand, I feel like, in the second half when the 49ers just came out completely flat. Like I was still I don't know about you, but in that third quarter, I mean, heck, when Sam Donald, when they scored one touchdown, like there was consistently throughout the game, I thought the 49ers might be able to come back. And that was something that would not have been possible if right out the gate they would have been down more than 21 points, which is what they would have been down if the 49ers let up touchdowns on all the opportunities they had in that first quarter. So I I don't know. I don't blame the defense too much. I do know Jair Brown had some missed tackles. Fred Warner really struggled a little bit. Um, I know Levin Black from is it Niners Nation or the show that he does with Rob? He kind of tweeted out that he was upset that Fred Warner was laughing and giggling after a missed tackle that he had. That was towards the end of the game. I don't know. I didn't see a huge problem with it. I didn't see it as them not living up to their standard. I really felt like the defense gave it their all, and it wasn't until the game had really gotten away with them and there was more than 4 interceptions thrown that it felt like the defense maybe was something that you could have brought up as an issue. So definitely a total team failure, but for me it was mostly on the offense and honestly mostly on Brock Purdy. There was multiple times in this game where especially in the beginning, where I was thinking that the 49ers were outplaying the Ravens. That first drive, the Ravens go 3-and-out. Then the 49ers methodically walk down the field. They're making, catches. They were every time that Brock Purdy threw an interception, it felt like for like 4 to 5 plays before that, they were like doing great. George Kittle was getting the ball at a high volume, which I wasn't expecting. But no, I thought I I keep bringing up what I almost tweeted, but I feel like in the moment, I'm so I like live and die with each pass. So I remember being like thinking and almost tweeting like the 49ers are out of the Ravens league. Like they're not like they look like they're totally going to outclass them. And then it felt like every time I had that thought, Brock Purdy would throw an interception. And I was like, dude, can you stop? Because if you just weren't giving away the ball, the 49ers would be winning by like 20 points. I guess as a Ravens fan, you could say, well, if we were capitalizing on all your interceptions, we'd be, I guess that could go either way. But yeah, the question is, do you think that this loss was all on Brock Purdy? I feel like over the course of the week, people are going to really be discussing him since this was an opportunity for him to kind of cement that MVP conversation. And much like Dak Prescott, he should the bet on that one.
Yeah, I mean that's one way to put it. I usually refrain kind of from putting the loss all on one person. I don't think that that's ever the case. But if you're talking about the top of the ladder, I'm not. I don't like using the word blame as much, but you're gonna say it. This one is primarily on Brock Purdy because there's not a chance that any team wins a game when you throw 4 interceptions. I broke them down. I don't think all 4 are his fault. I think 2.5 kind of are his fault. But regardless, you can't have those mistakes, especially in the cases that where you had them. 49ers throw the first pick in the red zone. Ultimate a momentum killer right there. That takes away a scoring opportunity that you had, at least to score 3 points. You didn't. Should have probably scored 7. You didn't. Then, the picks overall, they stop your momentum offensively. You can't really get anything going. And then you're at a point in your game script where you're down and you can't run the football like you usually do. And so I think that's the case. But like I said earlier, I do have issues with Kyle Shanahan in this game. I thought that there were certain issues with Kyle Shanahan with his play calling. I think you do want to run the ball a little more early. Like I said earlier, I don't think that him choosing to throw the ball as much as he did is the reason why the 49ers struggled offensively. I think that there
It
were
was working aside from the passes that like
exactly.
right?
But
It
you
wasn't
do
like they weren't like getting like they were like getting down the field. The first interception was like basically at the touch, like it should have been a touchdown.
exactly. But you do want to, you still want to incorporate McCaffrey in the way that you can try and force this Ravens, not Raiders, defensive line to kind of probably not tee off as much as they did in this game. But overall, I think that there's a lot of blame to go around. Like I said, Kyle Shanahan were a couple of them. I thought there were a few questionable decisions. And for a coach, when you have a few questionable decisions, that piles up a lot during the course of a game. Offensive line, I thought, was pretty bad. I mean, there's no way putting around it. They were pretty darn bad. And it makes sense given the personnel, especially at the end that they had out there. Colton McKivitz was awful. He was terrible. I mean, he's been pretty bad all year, but he was awful in this one. Jalen Moore came in, he gave up a sack. I mean, the offensive line as a whole at the end was just battered and beaten down. It's tough to win games when you're trying to drop back as much as you can and you can't throw the ball because obviously of the pressure that you're facing. Purdy clearly was flustered by the pressure. On one of his near picks, he has a free rusher coming at him and he rushed the throw and he almost ended up with another interception. I think the 49ers could have had potentially like 8 interceptions in this one.
Yeah.
I think that it was like that.
Right before that fourth one he threw, he almost threw one and you were
yeah,
like,
exactly. And so this one was an ugly one. Defensively, the reason I'm not going to put blame much on the defense is because the 49ers defense kept them in the game in the first half. They're not close without that defensive performance in the first half. In the second half, very clear. They were very tired in the second half. They were gassed. They did not have as much energy. Ravens had whatever they wanted in the second half. But in my opinion, the offense is the reason they lost this game. You can't have that performance on offense and expect your defense to pick you up for the whole game, especially not in this type of environment. At the beginning of the season and even periodically throughout the year, what I've said about the 49ers and what I've said about their offense what I've said about their team and their Super Bowl hopes is right now, I don't expect the 49ers to win a Super Bowl. I've said that throughout the year. And the reasoning that I had behind it was the quarterback play, but more importantly, how does this team, respond when they're down? When they're down and they need, to pick up some momentum. So far in the close games that we've seen like that, where it's truly coming down to the wire and you kind of need some performance in the second half, you haven't really seen the 49ers respond like that before. They're usually up. And I'm not going to fault them for usually being up, but in games like this and in games like the ones that you lost, you do want some better response, especially when you know this is the type of caliber of a team that you're going to play when it comes to the playoffs. And so right now, confidence is a little wavered, but is it that much wavered? Not necessarily. I think that this one game. You flush it down. I think they're still, like we said earlier, favorites in the NFC. You're home for the entirety of this of your playoff stretch. If you can win out, or if you get some help from another team, I think that there's a lot that could still go the 49ers way. And so we'll see. And potentially this could be the playoff matchup that you see in the Super Bowl.
I agree. It did, and the announcers even said it on TV. Zero, which is a crazy stat. 0 and 37 when the 49ers are down by 8 points.
Yeah.
I know that you shook your head, but to me that's crazy because when they were down in the second, coming out of the first half, I really did feel like they could have worked their way back up. And I feel like a lot of teams, even in the fourth half, when they were down by I think a little more than two touchdowns, I think 15 or 16 points, I still felt like there's been plenty of teams that have came back from that, but we've just never seen this 49ers team do that. And it sucks because it feels like we know how the 49ers win. And I think everyone assumed that you would have to be able to play a game like this and win a game where you're down in order to win the Super Bowl. So it does kind of bring up those same doubts that we've had all season, which is when this team is playing its type of game and when it's explosive, it looks like the best team in the NFL. But um but sorry, I got distracted because my sister and her boyfriend are over there. But yeah, I was just disappointed that I felt like
Right.
when I thought that maybe other teams would have came back from a deficit, I have zero faith in the 49ers offense to be able to do that. Even what was it? They were down with like six or 8 minutes left, and they weren't going tempo. They were like slowly, methodically trying to drive down the field, and you're like, you need like 3 touchdowns, dude. Let's get to it. Why do you think that Kyle Shanahan kind of doesn't have that extra gear?
Now, the 0 and 37 stat, I think that's the most cherry pick stat. Like, personally, I don't care at all about the 0 and 37 stat, just because if you look at any coach really throughout the league, a majority of these coaches, that's going to be the case. They're not when you're down 8 points, you're not going to win games usually entering the fourth quarter. Now, the fact that there are 0 wins could be a little concerning. That's not the issue that I usually care about. But if you're talking about, in this specific game, yeah, there were opportunities to win. And this goes back to my point. Right now, and really since the beginning of the season, like I said, I don't have confidence that the 49ers can pull out of like a come from behind victory or a close game victory or one that kind of is a gutsy kind of victory, right? When you look at all of their victories, they're by a wide margin. Again, I'm not going to fault them for winning by 20 points. That's not the case. But when it comes down to a game like this, the reason it comes down to a game like this is usually you're facing tougher competition that you're usually to see in the playoffs, which is why in the regular season, there are certain games I pinpointed as to these are the games where I want to see how they can respond. The Baltimore Ravens game, especially down the line, was the number one game that matched that criteria. And the
Yeah.
49ers, once again, were not able to rise to the challenge and kind of fight through and kind of come from behind and kind of win this one.
So I want to kind of transition this into now. I don't know if this is like a controversy, um, like I'm not trying to like stir the pot, but it is something that I generally was questioning, and they were questioning it on the broadcast too. So I don't feel like I'm just like unnecessarily bringing up stuff. But basically, prior to being, prior to kind of, you ended up saying that they called it a stinger, but it looked like he banged his head on the turf, Brock Purdy, in that fourth quarter. Prior to that, Trent Williams had been out. Then Jalen Moore went in for Trent Williams, and then he was out. The O-line was clearly having problems. The 49ers were losing by more than 3 touchdowns. And my initial reaction was they should take Brock Purdy out of the game. Why is he in the game? And when he did get injured and bang his head, I was kind of, I think maybe like some fans was like, Kyle, why didn't you take him out? Why did he have the opportunity to get hurt right there? He should have already been out of the game. But then, because I like to talk out of both sides of my mouth, then once he was taken out, and for like one play, Sam Darnold looked good, and they ended up scoring a touchdown. And there was an opportunity where the broadcasters weren't sure when the 49ers got the ball back, was Kyle going to hold Brock Purdy out, or was he going to keep Sam Darnold in the game, or let Brock Purdy have the opportunity to go back down? Because by then they were only down by about 2 touchdowns, right? So they technically could have came back. I think they only had 4 minutes, but they had their timeouts left. And once again, we're not accustomed to seeing the 49ers overcome deficits like that in such a amount of time. But if that was like the Chiefs, there would have been no question that Patrick Mahomes is in the game and that they have confidence that they can get 2 touchdowns like that, right? So when Kyle Shanahan did choose to kind of stick with Sam Darnold, was that, in your opinion, him benching Brock Purdy and saying Sam Darnold has the best opportunity to bring us back and potentially win this game? Or was that Kyle Shanahan saying this game is over with, I'm protecting my potential franchise quarterback, and we're kind of throwing in the towel and just trying to get out of this game without injuring anyone else?
Nah, this is not at all an indictment on Brock Purdy. And I
Okay.
actually disagree. I think if Patrick Mahomes was in this situation and Andy Reid was the coach, you pull him too. They should have
Okay.
pulled Brock Purdy before
Tell
that
me.
drive. I think they
Good.
should
Yeah.
have down three. The main reason down 3 touchdowns with 9 minutes left that you pull your quarterback and wave the white flag there is because your starting left tackle is injured and your offensive line was horrible. They were horrible at down the stretch. Brock Purdy is getting pressured a lot, and that's the reason a good portion of this offensive success is there. It's also a good portion of the reason why he was shaky. It's he was struggling to keep up with the pressure that Baltimore brings, specifically when they brought 4 pass rushers. What Baltimore does really darn well is they'll drop 7 or 8 players into coverage, make it really hard for you to fight between their zones, and then they'll only rush 4, but they'll have success rushing 4. And they had a ton of success against Colton McKivitz, even against Jalen Moore when he was in the game. Whoever it was, especially at the end, they had a ton of success up until that final Sam Darnold sack. I think they should have pulled him before. Kyle Shanahan confirmed it was a stinger, and they don't believe it'll be serious, doesn't think it'll linger. The reason that I think they brought up the stinger on broadcast is because he suffered the same injury last week when he missed a few plays against the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think this was at all to do with the injury or even to do with benching Brock Purdy. It was purely the situation because you're down a lot, especially at that point. It was well within 9 minutes. You're down a lot of, you're down 21 points. Your offensive line is even more banged up. And at that point, I think left tackle was Colt McKivitz, right tackle was Spencer Burford. That is not something you want to see in the middle of a game where you have to make such a shift. I think this was 100% the right move. He probably should have made it at the beginning of that drive, not even risk Brock Purdy getting injured. Sure, Sam Darnold had, a drive or two that were pretty solid up until the interception. That's fine. But I think that this is just a nothing burger. I don't think there's much of a storyline here. And I think Brock Purdy is very clearly the guy going next week.
I Okay. I agree. I think I want to. I'm going to transition, but I just want to give you one last hypothetical, because if Sam Darnold ended up looking so bad, he threw an interception of his own, and he's just a bad quarterback. So I feel like there's no controversy because of that. But if Sam Darnold would have brought them back, which he had the opportunity to do, they did score 1 touchdown, and like it looked like they were about to score another one before he threw that interception. Like, once again, both quarterbacks throwing interceptions in the red zone. Um, um, I think that that could have made things potentially interesting. I think Brock Purdy would have started next game, but I think if he continued to, because he never settled in, and I think that that
No.
is something that Kyle Shanahan deserves criticism on. Even though I think that the pass game was working, it did feel like potentially if he would have incorporated more Christian McCaffrey in that run game, that maybe Brock Purdy could have gotten into more of a flow and a rhythm. Because it did feel like he was kind of doing too much all game, like he never got comfortable truly. But yeah, that I think that there was an opportunity created where there could have been controversy, but because Sam Darnold sucks, there was no controversy. um,
Yeah, and I think when you talk about Sam Darnold in that case, I think even if he had scored that touchdown and they got another chance, you probably I don't think there's really an instance where you put Brock Purdy back into that game. It was pretty clear from that point on. Shanahan at 9 minutes or whatever it was made a decision. This game is over. He pulled Trent Williams. Williams wanted to go back in, according to Shanahan at the end of the game. Uh, Doctors kind of said
I don't
probably
like
wait.
that. Why does he? Do you think that that's good or bad? Like I don't know. I
You don't
don't.
like that for whose part?
I don't. I that they kind of threw in the towel with
Oh no, I think that was absolutely the right move. You're down 21. The issue, this game does not matter anymore. When you're
yeah.
down 21, you have 2 games left. When you're down this much, the other 2 games are even more important, especially
That's
when you consider
true.
that when you
Did
go to a
they came
tiebreaker, when you go to a
yeah.
tiebreaker, it's well, first of all, the 49ers are winning most of the tiebreakers. The only team that really has a chance other than the NFC East teams in a different tiebreaker is the Lions. When you go to the Lions, the number one thing in a tiebreaker is conference record. And so the other 2 games are conference games, but more importantly, you win those 2 games, you win the NFC, the number 1 seed. So the most important thing is getting everybody healthy for those 2 games. That's the way I look at it. No reason to risk anything. Even if Purdy was clear to go, you're not going to put him behind a shoddy offensive line. And because what's the game plan? You got to drop back. The defense knows you got to drop back. So they're going to send pressure, and you're going to have to probably get chunk plays. There's a chance you get sacked. Darnold got sacked in the short portion of the time that he played. He faced pressure and got hit down another time. You don't want to risk that with your starting quarterback at this point in the season, knowing the implications that kind of come with it. That's kind of my thought process behind it, and yeah, that's kind of the way that I see it.
No, you're right. You're definitely way more intelligent. Like
No,
it's way
not
more
that.
smart. I don't mean it like that. I mean like you're looking like I think maybe sometimes um like tomorrow I might look at things from like a more rational point of view.
Mm,
But I think in the moment I'm like, come on, just like do everything you can. And I'm not thinking, okay, in the grand scheme of this or grand scheme of things, this is an AFC team. They still have the opportunity to meet up with this team in the Super Bowl and win then. Maybe losing now gives them more motivation to try harder when they meet up again. And what's going to give them a better opportunity to win is if they get that bye week. And what do they need to get that bye week? They need to get out of this game with as little injuries as possible. They already have major
yeah,
injuries and rest up because the most important things are going to be beating the Commanders and then beating the Rams. Someone in the comments, I didn't star it, so I think it's too far back, did ask if the Rams were scary. I'm going to ask you that, but first, I do want to once again say anyone in the comments, if you're seeing any updates about injuries, let me know. I was just looking on Twitter, and the only thing that I saw was kind of in agreement with you. Kyle Shanahan at his press conference said that Brock Purdy's first interception was the only interception he considered a true big mistake, and that the other 3 were more unfortunate passes, batted down,
and that
and that
fourth
Purdy
one was
was
pretty bad too. The one that he threw way in front of the guy.
apparently he said he was hit before it.
He
That's
was
what.
hit as he threw it. Yeah, but you got to throw that a little earlier. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I'm just saying that's what I guess, and obviously he's probably trying to also cover for
Right.
him. That's what Kyle Shanahan said, and that's the only thing that I was just looking at Lombardi, so I didn't see any major injury updates yet. Now I always say to wait for because even if Kyle Shanahan came out right now and was like, Brock Purdy's fine, Trent Williams is running on his ankle, what's really going to matter is how it feels tonight for them when the adrenaline has worn off after they get the MRIs and everything. So we're going to get the true injury updates tomorrow. But yeah, did you Are you worried about facing the Rams now,
Good
or
question.
the
And
Steelers? I guess.
yeah, and before I say that, I want to say one other thing. I mean, like I said, I'm going to give Shanahan criticism, but I'm not also going to just baby a certain player or a certain, a certain person. The fact of the matter in this game is Brock Purdy played bad. It's
Yeah.
just the fact of the matter. Does this mean he's going to play bad next week? No. Does this mean that his season is over? No. I don't think that there's. It, all it is Purdy played bad. He's got a chance to bounce back next week. Next week's a different opportunity. Now, going to the Rams game, the Rams have an argument to be the second best team in the NFC right now. I think that there is a legitimate argument that the Rams can have the second best team behind the 49ers in the NFC. And the reason for that is because they might have the best quarterback in the NFC at the moment. And I don't think that's an understatement.
No.
He might be in the top three. I think Dak Prescott could be in there with the MVP level play that he's kind of having. And then if you look at the rest, I mean, it might be Dak Prescott, Stafford, and Hurts. And I think that you can have a true argument that Stafford might be the best of the bunch at the moment. And so, for that specific reason, I think the Rams right now are one of the scarier teams in the NFC. Now, do you view them as scary to the 49ers? I'll say yes and no. I think, like I said, they right now are probably the top contender to the 49ers, and they're going to likely play the 49ers not only in week 18, but potentially in the playoffs as well. On top of that, when you talk about, the rest of the NFC teams, or I guess when you talk about the Rams specifically compared to the rest of the NFC teams, what team has the 49ers beat so many times over the last few weeks or the last few years? It's the Rams. They have, there's a difference when you look at the rosters of why the 49ers match up well against the Rams. Their physicality is good. When you look at the cornerback play for the Rams, it's tough for them to guard against the San Francisco receivers. The Rams do have an improving run game. They have Kyron Williams back. That's an important factor on top of having Stafford. But overall, when you look at the rosters, it's the 49ers have a better roster. That's kind of the one thing that you'll point to. But the Rams did beat the 49ers in the playoffs to go to the Super Bowl not too long ago, back in 2021. Completely different roster now. But I think if you're talking about contenders to the 49ers, the Rams have a good argument to potentially be number two.
I completely agree. I like that you mentioned the physicality. I think that the teams that would scare me the most in the Super Bowl would be teams like the Ravens, the Browns, the Bills. Like defense, we've really seen this offense struggle against competition. Like I think that that's why fans have a hard time feeling scared about going up against Dallas, and maybe why the Rams were overlooked going into that NFC Championship game is because teams that I think fans and maybe media see as more like glitz and glam, we kind of expect them to not challenge the 49ers as much. And especially this year, we've really seen the only time this offense has been stunted is against these defenses that really win in the trenches. That's, I mean, when we think about other games that have given the 49ers problems,
Yeah.
it's when they've dominated in that O-line area when our defensive line hasn't been able to dominate as much. Both of those were really big struggles against the Browns, and I feel like this was the biggest test. And I was talking about this with either Jose or Marco going into this game, was that in my opinion this team was the most like Browns that we were going to face, except for they also had a defense that would be able to put up points against us, and it seemed like unfortunately, the 49ers, made their mistakes of their own. I know it was Ryan Hensley told me that there's something, let me see what exactly was the number of, like, once you throw a certain amount of interceptions, it's
Oh yeah. If you throw 3+ picks, the chance in history that you win is 9%.
yeah. It's
But talking about the Rams real quick, one other thing I want to mention, and it's not apples to apples, but if you talk about the team that
Do you
kind of
think
gave the
Stafford is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy?
yeah, yeah,
I think prior to this year that wasn't a question, but then with
yeah,
Stafford's
pretty
recent
elevated.
shoulder
But Stafford, in
problem.
my opinion, is the best quarterback in the NFC right now. I firmly believe that. I think I'd take him over Dak, who had been in the MVP conversation, probably would take him over Hurts, and I think I'd take him over Purdy as well. That's the kind of way that I see it. And again, this is not me saying Stafford is the MVP. No, no. But if you're talking about who's playing the best right now, I think it'd be hard for you to go anywhere but Stafford. Their one loss, if you're talking about the Rams in the last, I believe, 6 games, was to the Ravens. But the Rams in that game gave the blueprint of how to beat the Ravens. They lost on a walk-off punt return touchdown in overtime, but the Rams in that game ran the ball pretty damn well. Kyron Williams had 115 yards or 114 yards on 25 carries. Stafford was great. He threw for 3 touchdowns, nearly 300 yards. I mean, they gave you the blueprint on how to potentially beat the Ravens defense, which had been elite and electric up until that point. I think that that's another way, not an apples to apples comparison. Obviously, the 49ers played a little differently and it's different games, but they're another team that showed that they can compete with a competitor.
I completely agree. I feel like I said this before, but I think that the Rams have very like 2021 vibes where they had like a lull, but they've really been able to. Sean McVay's really gotten the best out of his offensive talent and his defensive talent, and they do seem to be playing their best football going into the playoffs. Yeah, it's going to be scary. I mean, we really fans and media like and the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan really wanted to get this win so that week 18 game wasn't an all-out game wasn't so important. And now both of these games are extremely important for the 49ers, especially with all these injuries. A lot of people are talking about the O-line and saying, we can't really expect the quarterback to shine against such a bad O-line. I agree that the O-line was terrible. Brock Purdy also threw 3 interceptions before Trent Williams got hurt, is my immediate takeaway. I mean, it was just a total team failure, but my takeaway is that we can criticize the O-line without taking away blame from Brock Purdy. Does that make sense? I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think so.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
agree, but there's a couple. We have the O-line was worse. I hate that everyone is blaming Brock Purdy with this O-line. The O-line is supposed to be 5 men working as one. They must do heavy lifting so the QB and skill guys can shine. Just a lot of questions about the O-line. So I don't know if you have any concerns moving forward with Trent Williams potentially out, or if you take away blame from Brock Purdy because of the O-line, which is what some people are kind of talking about. Yeah, what was your?
I don't think I'll take away blame from Brock Purdy. I'll just add more to the blame because the offensive line didn't play great. And again, I think that that's a part of the reason Purdy was rattled, and also part of the reason Shanahan was rattled at times with his play calling. He didn't trust the offensive line. There was a time where he called 3 screen passes in a row. The same kind of screen pass. Two of those motion type of screen passes, and then one where I believe he hit he hit McCaffrey for like a short gain. And so, I think that there were certain elements of this game where the offensive line did not play well, especially in the fourth quarter. But I think you can't defer blame from one or the other. I think they both are a part to blame in this case.
And even behind a bad O-line, I think Leroy makes a good point saying Christian McCaffrey had 103 yards, 7.5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he did well behind a bad offensive line. I do think he should have ran more, been given more of an opportunity to run. It seemed like they started going to him more towards the end of the game, but
In the second half, in the third quarter, is kind of where
yeah,
he kind of got kicking off. And again, this is something intriguing, right? This is probably a debate that'll go through the week. I don't hate the way the 49ers started because they were
yeah,
moving the ball,
I
throwing
agree.
the ball. And the reason McCaffrey didn't probably get as many carries as you'd normally expect is not only for that script, but also because you're down 21 points. They didn't run the ball to the amount that they usually do overall. They threw 46 times, ran 18, and ran 14 really with McCaffrey. You don't expect that because they're down 21 points as well. So I think that that's another part. You usually probably would see McCaffrey, if this wasn't a blowout, you'd probably see him in the 20s, probably in the 21-20 range, and nobody's complaining then, even with the way the beginning of this game started. And so I think that I think there's arguments to both sides of the debate there.
I completely agree. I just wanted to talk Rick Diaz, hopefully that's how he says his name, off the ledge. He's saying this is a disgusting game. I will never forget the season was over. Back to the drawing board for 2024. I will say, as kind of doom and gloom as we're being, just because it was a really kind of humiliating game towards I want to say the second half. Once again, the first half, I really had that like if we would have done a post game reaction after the first half, I would have been like, I'm really proud of the defense. The skill position players have done really well. Maybe Kyle Shanahan should have called a few more runs, but I'm not even that mad at him. To me, I would have came and been like, Brock Purdy lost his mind and felt uncomfortable, but we've seen him bounce back, and this was just a bad game. The only reason that now I'm like, this is more of a complete team failure is because of that second half. Um, I really feel like this team will bounce back, and I'm going to ask you, instead of saying, because not only is the season not over, I think that they can still get that first seed. I would still have a lot of confidence in them winning their next two games. Um, but instead of talking about that, because that's not the goal for the 49ers, that's not their ultimate goal. Their ultimate goal is winning the Super Bowl. Did this game change your opinion on their ability to win a Super Bowl?
No, because my initial thought was that they weren't going to win one. I think my opinion is the same.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
All
think my
right.
opinion.
Don't
Yeah, I think
worry,
my
guys.
opinion's the
Rohan's
same.
not here to pick you up.
No, I mean, let me say this though. Do I think that this changes my outlook on their season? No. Like we said at the beginning of the show, they are the top team in the NFC still. I don't think the NFC is that strong. I think that they were a little overrated coming into the year. They're the top team right now in the NFC. What does the top team usually in the NFC end up doing? They end up making the Super Bowl. They make the Super Bowl. I mean, all of these comments are going to just flip. Especially, I mean, I think if they win next weekend, most of these comments are going to flip. But my personal belief since the beginning of the season is that I don't think they'll win a Super Bowl in 2023. That's just been my belief. I've shared my
Why?
reasons.
See, I feel like I've been like, this is the year to do it. The
No,
NFC is
uh,
down. The NFL in general is down.
it
Brock
was
Purdy's.
the reason that I gave is the reason that I kind of gave at the top of the show. There have been a couple of reasons for me as to why I don't believe they win this year. The number one thing is I haven't seen their ability to close out these
Yeah.
important clutch games. And I don't think that it's a problem in the clutch. I just think that we haven't seen them perform when their backs are against the wall pretty much. That's the way that I kind of look at it. When you look at the games where their backs have been against the wall this year, they've lost. They
Yeah, they've
haven't pulled them
always
through.
lost whenever
Especially
they've
when you
had
look at the
the
six game winning streak. Their backs haven't been against the wall once. I mean, you might talk about maybe they're down or it's a 4 point game or something at halftime. That's not what I consider. When you're down, 10 points, when you're down, something like that, what is your response? How can you do? And even if you lose, what's the response? This week, they didn't have that response. The last few losses, they didn't have that response. And I've kind of sensed that from the beginning of the season. That's why I said prior to the year, I don't think this team is going to win the Super Bowl this year. Now, where I'll say I've changed is my thoughts on the rest of the NFC have changed. My standards for them have lowered. I do think that there are certain teams that I think my standards have lowered for, like the Eagles. But I don't think that they'll win the NFC the Super Bowl this year. They could make it. Again, when I say this, I don't mean no, they're not even making the playoffs. They're not gonna go past the first
Yeah,
round of the playoffs. I
I'm
mean
gonna.
that they are very likely to make an NFC championship appearance. They might even make the Super Bowl. I just don't expect them to win it. That's kind of my thoughts.
I have to agree. I saw Akash said that. He said, I reiterating basically. I think most fans and people in that analyzing the 49ers this season kind of agree, and they have that same conclusion. My biggest concern, aside from injuries, with the 49ers headed into the playoffs is how does this team respond to close back and forth, up and down type games where there's where it's a pressure packed playoff environment or a Super Bowl environment. Especially Purdy, how does he react during these games? They've had opportunities to, show themselves in these games, and in every single one they've lost. It's not like it's been some they've lost, some they've come back from. And when we think about Super Bowl champions, when I think about the reason for me as a 49ers fan, the reason, even though they just lost to the Raiders, the reason that I hope that that was correct, the Raiders, right? The reason that the Chiefs still scare me is because we've seen that quarterback and that coach be in the most tumultuous games and came back. We've literally seen them be down by 10 in the fourth quarter of a Super Bowl and come back and win. And unfortunately, even in this game, which is a regular season game against the AFC, which technically has really no effect on the 49ers schedule seating in the playoffs or any real pressure aside from just like wanting to cement yourself as a top dog in the NFL, like just to fans, just to prove to yourself that you're on their level. But there's no actual real pressure in this game. And I looked at the 49ers being down and said, there's teams in the NFL that could overcome this. And I've never seen the 49ers do it. And I have hope that they can do it, but I have no proof that they can. And because there's no physical proof, it's hard for me to trust that they can. I can be a fan in the way that I get excited and I'm kind of hanging on every throw and I want them to show me that they can do that, but I have no like actual tangible evidence that they can. And this was once again an opportunity for them to do it. Even if they didn't come back and win, they could have came back and made this like within one possession. They could have, tried. They could have shown, like I said, I think there was about 6 or 7 minutes left, and they could have been higher tempo trying to work down the field. And instead, they kind of accepted defeat. And it just feels like they can have an entire fourth quarter if they're down by 2 touchdowns. It feels like the team just kind of gives up. I will say I want to give some shout outs. I think Christian McCaffrey, I thought Deebo Samuel. I want to shout out Deebo Samuel because I really got on him last year in the beginning of this year. He's my favorite player, and I've been so excited with the tenacity that he's been playing with. And I felt like he kept that till the very end of this game, even when it felt like Kyle Shanahan had already checked out. I felt like Debo and Christian McCaffrey, both of those players, kept high intensity until the very end of the game, which I was proud of. Just to highlight 2 players. That was kind of a tangent.
Yeah, I think I understand your point, and I know what you mean about checking out in this portion. To me, the checking out isn't the reason that I have doubts. It's more so when you
Okay.
look at their response in the third quarter. I don't care what they. I think that I don't really care what they did in the fourth quarter. This game was over at the end of the third quarter when you're down 3 touchdowns, and then your star left tackle goes out. But sorry, but in the third quarter, when you go down, when you're at 16-12, you get the ball first, and you end up losing that quarter 17-0. That's a problem. There needs to be a much better response when your back is against the wall to not only play good offense but play good defense. I thought the defense they seemed pretty worn out at the end of the first half with the way that they played because they came out tired. I mean, in the second half, what happened on those in that first drive? What do you call it? First of all, Mitch Wishnowsky with that penalty ends up leaving Baltimore at their
I
41.
know everyone was talking him up. He got so in his head. Everyone was hyping him up all week because he made that freaking run, and he got in his head, and he
Yeah,
thought he
I
was losing.
mean, oh well, but that penalty gives Baltimore the chance to score from the 44-yard line. Baltimore, what do? One play, they got a 39-yard pass, and then it's the Algalore touchdown where Jason Verrett was in coverage. I mean, just like that, because of a couple of mistakes. One, the offense goes 3 and out to begin the half. You try to run on first down, didn't work. Then on second down, you throw a short pass. Third down, it's to Willie Snead. And you throw an incompletion there. You end up punting. Then, just like
I
that,
like that you said that like that was. Sorry, that was just funny. You're like, they're down Willie Snead, so obviously that was ridiculous.
the reason that I bring that up, though, is because in this specific game, that was the ball where it was a near interception type of play, where
Yeah.
it's like a bobbled pass up in the air. Third down, you're going to Willie Snead in this game. Who are you not going to? You're not going to Jawan Jennings. There's a big difference in the
Someone
body
tagged
size.
someone on
Oh
Twitter
no.
because
What happened?
like legitimately 4 games ago, Juwan Jennings for like 2 games in a row did nothing except for commit penalties. And so then I
Oh,
stupidly tweeted and I was like, what does he do here? And then literally immediately after I tweeted that, he made like an excellent third down conversion. And then every game since then, there's been this one guy who must be like Juwan Jennings' dad or something. Because every time Juwan Jennings does something good now, he just literally goes
well,
at
they should have probably tweeted at you again today. Because the thing is, when you talk about a guy like Juwan Jennings, the way that the rest of the offense works is you allow yourself to go through a regular progression on third down, knowing that you have a safe check down option on in Juwan Jennings. Willie Snead is not that option. But the point of the matter is the game flips right there. You have a terrible first drive offensively where you can't get much moving. Then you commit penalties, 2 of them. McNichols had a false start, and then the Mitch Wishnowsky penalty at the end of that punt return. That gives Baltimore the ball up 4 at your 44-yard line. Defense looks tired. They score a touchdown in 3 plays. Just like that, it's 23-12. What do you do on literally the next play? Brock Purdy, poor pass. He throws it an interception to Patrick Queen. It just turns from in literally like a matter of 20 seconds. It goes from 16-12 to 33-12. At that point, at that point, it's kind of game over. And I don't want to say game over, or it's 30-12, but I don't want to say game over because it's 12 minutes left in the third quarter. But just like that, when you talk about your backs against the wall, how are you going to respond? The 49ers gave up 14 points in a matter of a minute, in the matter of the first like 3 minutes of the half. And they had every opportunity to come back and potentially put their mark on this game. That's the portion that I'm talking about. In the fourth quarter, again, I don't really mind the way that they did it just because you've got a left tackle injured. You do not want to end with any more injuries. They ended with a good amount more. They ended with Aaron Banks injured. They ended with Brock Purdy. I mean, it's a stinger, but they still, you don't want that.
On that, by the way.
On Aaron Banks, are you saying?
Just on any of the injuries. I'm just going to look really quick one last time.
From what I'm seeing, let's see. One intriguing injury, though, Ambry Thomas.
Every offensive lineman is injured right now.
But one intriguing injury, Ambry Thomas, he has a hamstring injury. That's why Jason Verrett was in.
Okay. Yeah. That makes me happy to know because I thought that they just because Ambry Thomas was doing good all game and then he gave up like one bad pass. And I didn't normally Matt Barrows is usually really on tweeting about injuries during the game. And he didn't update anything about Ambry Thomas. And then all of a sudden I saw Verrett was in. And I was like, did they take Ambry Thomas out after one bad play? I've been impressed with him. So that makes sense. It was an injury. That sucks.
As for Aaron Banks, he had a toe injury. That's the issue with Banks. He's kind of been dealing with turf toe for a good portion of this season. So that's the reason that he was kind of pulled at the end. But that's kind of my little spiel as to where I think the 49ers went wrong and why ultimately I've kind of maintained my stance throughout the year. I don't think it was more so to do with the fourth quarter when them waving the white towel. I was fine with that. It's just their response in the third quarter that I thought changed the outlook of this game.
That makes sense. Really quickly, Alan says lesson learned, still the number 1 seed in the NFL. I think that's if we do want to go off on more of a go out on more of a positive note, 49ers still have the opportunity to solidify that number 1 seed moving forward. And I don't know if you agree with this, but I did see some people kind of talking about it. So some people prefer to kind of get hit in the mouth before going to the playoffs, get some bruises, get some teach tape. I always think that I don't necessarily think you need to lose a game to do that. I think Kyle Shanahan and a lot of players and coaches have said, we can learn a lot from wins too. Just because you win the game doesn't mean you're flawless. But I wonder, closing out this live, do you think that, if you were going to lose, maybe now is a good time to lose compared to, like I said, the next 2 games are going to be teams in the NFC, and then going into the playoffs, obviously, can't lose.
You'd much rather lose in the regular season than in the playoffs. That's going to be my stance. That's why I think, a lot of people, the way that they'll look at it, again, This is you're trying to spin a loss, right? You're trying to spin a loss into something positive. You got hit in the mouth. The good thing is you got weeks to recover about hitting when you get hit in the mouth, and then you come out tougher usually. So that's the way that you look at it. I'm not gonna say this is a good thing. It's never a good thing when you lose, right? But you definitely prefer you lose now than in the playoffs. So if you're going to lose, this was going to be the game that you were going to lose. So the hope is the hope isn't that you got hit in the mouth. The hope is how do you recover from it. 49ers show that they didn't lose a beat when they play the Commanders next week, and then more specifically the Rams in Week 18 when they try and close out the 1 seed. That's going to be the most important portion of it. And again, they look tired. The hope was you win this game. You potentially could rest a little bit in Week 18. Right now, that doesn't seem to be the case. I don't anticipate the Eagles losing this upcoming week. I forget exactly. I think they play. I forget exactly who it is. It might be the Cardinals or it might be the
Cardinals. You're right.
Cardinals. I believe Cardinals.
They had to play the Giants and the
Yeah,
Cardinals.
yeah. So I don't anticipate them losing, which means Week 18 is going to matter. You still can win out. Like this comment says, you're probably still very much favored to get the 1 seed. But this was a hit in the mouth. The point is, how are you going to recover?
I completely agree. Wait, are we tied with Detroit now? I don't think that that's true. I think that we have like more wins in the conference than them.
We're technically tied record wise because what do you call it? We're 11-4. Detroit's 11-4, but it's going to be kind of hard for Detroit to get the 1 seed because this isn't a conference game. We're still 9-1 in the conference. Yeah. Detroit has 3 conference losses. They lost to the Packers recently. That kind of put a huge dent in their 1 seed hopes. Not the Packers, sorry. They lost to the Packers and the Bears recently. Those two put a huge dent in their 1 seed hopes because they have 3 conference losses. The only way Detroit can get the 1 seed is if they win out and if the 49ers lose out. And I think there's got to be a little bit like one of the NFC East teams also has to lose out or something. Detroit's chances are kind of slim because of their conference record.
But it really is in the 14 as far as I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the 49ers, it's really in their hands. If they win out, they solidify that number 1 seed, right? They have to win out, but
you're saying if they win out, they get the 1 seed? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. If they win out, they get the 1 seed.
So the pressure's on them. I mean,
it definitely is because if they lose, it's very likely Philly climbs up and Philly gets the 1 seed because I don't envision them, even after this game today, I don't envision them losing to New York or Arizona. So the pressure is on them. They've got to win the next 2 games. If they don't win the next 2 games, it's likely they're out of the 1 seed. But you're still favored to win the next 2 games. We'll see. I think I'm not going to overlook an opponent, but main game is that Rams game. How are you going to match up against the Rams right before the playoffs?
Yes. 49ers control their own destiny. ESG, we did do a whole segment on the Rams, but we agreed that they are definitely, shooting up, and they're playing their best football right now. Rohan even talked about thinking Stafford was the best quarterback in the NFC right now. So definitely going to be a scary game, but they do control their own destiny. I'm going to be disappointed if they lose either of these next 2 games. I know that the Rams are feisty right now, but talent-wise, I just see no excuse for the 49ers to lose to the Commanders or to the Rams. They really need to. I know they're tired. I know that they're slow right now, but they really need to close out these next 2 games, get that first bye week rest. They definitely need it. They need to heal up. They're not tackling as well, so even the guys who aren't injured enough to be taken out of the game definitely are going to benefit from that rest. We already saw that in the bye week that they had during the season. But I'm gonna there's a lot of comments, but I'm gonna wind this down, let Rohan get back to the last of his Christmas celebrations. Let all you guys get the rest of your Christmas celebrations. Please make sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe to Rohan's YouTube channel. Follow him on Twitter. I'm sure he's going to be putting some articles out about this game. I'm going to be going live with, I think, Jose Sanchez tomorrow, and then Steph later on in the week. Also, I'll be on Eric Crocker's channel. I'm sure that I know that Rohan said him and Ryan Hensley are going to have a feisty show coming up. So make sure to like and subscribe to both of our YouTube channels. Turn those post game or turn those notifications on because we're going to have live streams throughout the week. But definitely tune back into this channel tomorrow. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a good Christmas. Don't let this ruin your guys' Christmas. You know what I mean? I think I know that it can be easy to do, but have fun with your family. It was a fun game for a little bit of a disappointing loss, but like JT said, the 49ers really control their own destiny, and hopefully, to me, as long as Brock Purdy can bounce back, if Brock Purdy wouldn't have done bad in this game, I think they could have won this game. So that is an optimistic way to spin this. Is even with all the um, problems that went on defense with some of the offensive players with Kyle Shanahan's game plan. If Brock Purdy just throws 2 less interceptions, I think they could have won. 1 less interception, maybe. He threw 3 interceptions and they were in that game. So it's really going to be all about him kind of settling down, and hopefully him and Kyle Shanahan have that chemistry and they can work back up, and against the Commanders will be a good get back game before they face the Rams, which a lot of people have rightfully pointed out is going to be a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. All right. Well, Merry Christmas, guys. Thank you so